My report will focus on the media policies and media strategies of terrorist groups in the Middle East. And what it boils down to is that the single group that has colossal influence in the media space is ISIS. It dwarfs all the other terrorist groups by comparison in terms of its media clout and its recruiting opportunities. Even Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, it appears these days to be rather, seeking to defend itself from ISIS, which seeks to discredit it in its publications. So it's basically a blow for blow fight between the two groups, but Al-Nusra is the underdog here. I would like to start my report by two quotes. I walk the streets of Bahrain and feel imprisoned. I feel tied up. It's like someone is always watching me. This world means nothing to me. I want to be free. I want to go back. People are giving their lives away. That's the honorable life. And there was a letter, and the second one is a letter from one terrorist to his mother. As you know and watch on television, the infidels and Rafida have gone too far in their oppression, killing, torture, and violations of Muslims' honor. I, by God, cannot stand by and see my Muslim sisters and brothers being killed, while some of them appeal to Muslims and find nobody coming to their help. And I sit without doing anything. I wanted to be like Al-Mutabsim Billah. And the most important reason is that longed for heaven, near the Prophet Muhammad, peace to be upon him, and I wanted to ask for forgiveness for you in the afterlife. That is a letter written by a young citizen of Bahrain who got into Syria through Turkey. In 2012, he went through some of the groups of the Free Syrian Army and then Al-Nusra, and eventually he went back to Bahrain being disillusioned about his former brothers in arms, but having spent three months back in Bahrain, he found out he was unable to cope with peaceful life and reintegrate into it. So he spoke over Skype with his former brothers in Syria, and after that he joined ISIS. He made quite a career in Islamic State, making himself a name as a fearless and fierce fighter, always saying that he was seeking the death of a martyr, and he eventually found it. He died. The second quote was from his letter to his mother. All of the fighters who join Daesh, they write their last will, and his last will was a letter to his mother. This is one of the tens of thousands of personal stories of the militants and extremists who are currently fighting for Islamic State. The media apparatus of ISIS works on several directions. One of them is on the interior, that is hyping up the militants, keeping up their morale, boosting up their morale. And the other direction is outwards, and that is preaching to the others. One of them is made through a special news agency called Hayab, and another one goes through digital media, through messengers, through Skype, through social media. And that is some direct work of the envoys, of the emissars of the Islamic group. The Al-Hayat publishes several magazines, including Dabiq, which has already published 12 issues, each of them 70 pages thick. And that is, I've read through them, that is 70 pages of hell that is psychologically impossible to handle, because on every page there is thick propaganda of terror. There is and tremendous amount of hatred spewed through those pages. There is also a magazine called Constantinople, published in Turkish, and Dar al-Islam, published in French. It's published 7 issues so far, and also recently a Russian language magazine has been launched called Istok, or Source. It's had three issues so far. There are also propaganda videos spread through social media. There are recruitment videos in order to strengthen the morale of the of ISIS fighters and its supporters inside and outside Syria. And there's another group of videos which is threats to the international community from Daesh. The propaganda is based on this idea of splitting the world into us and them, us the rightful Muslims and them the kuffar and the crusaders. I will just give you two quotes. Through the blessed operation in the Sinai Vilayat, we destroyed a passenger jet of the Russian crusaders, killing 224 kuffar. Glory to the Allah. Thanks to the glorious operation in France, the streets of Paris have become too close to the kuffar, and we have killed 200 and wounded 300 kuffar. Glory to the Allah. These are the words that these publications describe two of the most gruesome terrorist attacks of this year. In the same language, they speak about this kind of acts in various languages and cast all kinds of these terrible terrorist attacks. They cast them as these glorious victories of the true Muslims, and even when they were talking about the Russian passenger jet that was blown up above Egypt, they managed to somehow claim that one of the jet's pilots was formerly a military pilot who killed people in Chechnya, and that there was some kind of a strip actress on board who also brought indignity on other passengers, and that was used to justify the downing of a passenger jet with more than 200 people on board. There are direct calls and appeals in those publications to bring down governments, primarily the secular governments of the Middle East, who try to implement a Western model of democracy in their countries. Of course, the list starts with Egypt, but there were also similar texts directed at the citizens of Jordan. The existing regimes and governments of the Middle East are seen by radical ideologues as corrupt, have sold out Islam. The propaganda urges Muslims to join Islamic State as a state that already is a fact of life, is a fact of world politics. It urges them to surrender their property and lead a righteous life. There's also a lot of propaganda of death in those publications, of death as a martyr, as a way of getting into heaven, and that's how the new recruits are turned into terrible mechanisms who seek death. And they're opposed by people who want to live. When ISIS captured Mosul, it is understandable why the huge Iraqi army fled from the outnumbered force of terrorists, because those terrorists are like zombies. They're impossible to stop because they don't fear death. There are ideas of absolute terror to be sought in countries where the kuffar live. The idea of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth are also broadly spread, and most of that propaganda is based on pointing to the slave-like life that Muslims are forced to live in Western countries, that they have to submit themselves to the kuffar because life in their own home countries has become unbearable in many ways, again, thanks to those same Western kuffar. There are a lot of derogatory comparison between the Islamic civilization and Western civilization, and old grudges dating back to the Crusades. There is constant casting that Western countries and Russia do everything against the Islamic world to harm Muslims, and any counter-propaganda is thrown back at the West by ISIS to show that this is a conspiracy against the true Muslims by the West and the corrupt regional governments. Propaganda directed at various parishes is tailored specifically to fit the audience. to Muslims who live outside the Muslim world, there is a specific message and specific way of propaganda. There is specific propaganda for Muslim youth and for non-Muslim youth. Mainly, they're trying to be sold the concept of saving their soul through righteous life. And rather surprisingly, there is a separate strain of propaganda for women, especially for well-off women. The reason of ISIS propaganda being successful has two reasons from the point of view of how they organize their strategy, and has referred to how we can use their propaganda to prove that they are unprofessional. Well, that's not true. They are highly professional. If anyone has looked inside ISIS publications, those are high caliber, high quality media products. It is fantastic, fantastic design. It is catchy. It looks great, even though it is a terrible thing to say. It is a trait. It is great work on the part of the makeup artists, the layout designers. The quality of text, of course, is something that we need to discuss separately. But as regards the picture, the appearance, it is something that you can compare to the major publications such as Forbes. They massively use digital technologies, and that is something very characteristic for Islamic State. And actually, the civilized world is falling behind ISIS. We journalists, we fall behind ISIS. We can't catch up with them because we're not using the kind of media that they use to convey their message. They speak the same language with their parish, with the people they try to inoculate. We try to inoculate. We try to be neutral and objective. They are personal with people they inoculate. They have a very clear understanding of their target audiences. Of course, they're populist, but they know the right message to spread, and that is promise of brotherhood, of unity, of justice. That is exactly what many people lack, and especially in Europe, where so many people feel lonely. These immigrant communities fall very easily for this promise of unity, of not being alone, of being part of something greater than yourself. So ISIS also proposes a very strong basis of values, of religious values, of course. And of course, there is a strong demand for violence in today's world, which we must not brush off the table. In today's world, especially young people who have seen so much violence on video games, some of them really want to see it, to try it out in real life. And of course, ISIS is also masterful at playing with the religious texts, manipulating the uneducated part of the Ummah to sell to them various ideas under the veneer of being Islamist. From the point of view of the environment in which ISIS operates, as regards the media environment, we can point to the fact that there is no system in place to integrate Muslim immigrants in Western countries. There is no work, no collaboration with the Muslim Ummas in the non-Muslim countries, even in Russia. There's no propaganda of moderate Islam. There is no beautiful, catchy picture that would attract people to that. There are no alternatives to ISIS propaganda. There is no social justice. There is no brotherhood, and some of the basics of democracy are flawed, which is sadly true. The traditional societies are being eroded. Their social values are lacking. People can't say right from wrong, but of course, primarily the hazardous, risky policies of the West in the Middle East in the last 50 years, which have made the region highly unstable and unpredictable. And also, the people of the region now tend to blame the kuffar, the West, of all their problems. And ISIS propaganda tries to tell people that the West is to blame for all of their current problems. Thank you.